The AFL GOAT. A topic not talked about enough. Who is the greatest of all time? Is it Leigh Matthews, Gary Ablett Sr., Gary Ablett Jr., Robert Harvey, Wayne Carey, Lance Franklin, Tony Lockett? The list goes on. And it goes on because there isn't a clear answer. Take a look at the NBA. Majority of NBA fans would agree that Michael Jordan and LeBron James are the clear greatest of all time. There's rarely another player that can surpass these two. So, I thought to myself, how can someone determine the greatest AFL player of all time? Surely there's some hidden metric that gives us enough information to give us a clear answer. I decided to use numbers and statistics to find the 15 best players of all time, as well as our AFL GOAT. Will it work? Will it be the list that everyone looks up to? First of all, I am only counting players that played after the year 1970. Now that may defeat the whole purpose of this video, as so many players that can be considered the GOAT came from before the year 1970. But because we're using numbers to find the greatest player, players from older eras will have an unfair disadvantage compared to newer players, as most statistics simply weren't tracked back then. But I am looking into making a part 2 to this video using every player. So, what are the statistics I'm using? I've narrowed it down to 10 major categories, as well as 5 minor categories, which will determine our greatest player. The points will be awarded in 2 ways. The first being for a certain amount of points earned per award they've received. So for example, if Jamarra Ugle-Hagan won 3 Brownlows, and Brownlow medals were worth 5 points each, Jamarra would earn 15 points. The second way in which I've given out points applies to overall statistics, like goals kicked or games played. The top 10 players in that statistic would be given the points. So for example, Brent Harvey, who has played the most games, will earn 10 points, but Adam Goodes, who's played the 10th most games, will earn 1 or 2 points, dependent on scaling. The last thing when it comes to the point system is how each category is measured. Some categories will be worth more points than other categories, and that's simply because some are worth way more than others. I've attempted to scale each category so that they are worth the correct amount of points. However, it definitely won't be perfect. And one final point. I've collected the data after round 23 of the AFL 2022 home and away season, but before the 2022 final series, so some statistics may be a little different compared to what they actually are now. But I can assure you that it will not have an effect on the final 15 players. That being said, let's jump right into it. First off, we have career goal. Pretty self-explanatory. Nothing to say apart from the fact that Lance Franklin is on this list and he will continue to climb past Doug Wade. I genuinely think him kicking his 1000th goal is one of, if not the greatest AFL moment of the 21st century. It's crazy how this feat is not talked about enough, as it will be a long time until the next player kicks his 1000th goal. Next up is average goals per game. This list includes many of the players from the last list, with the addition of Peter Hudson absolutely clearing everyone else. You can also see how this category is worth less points than the first, due to it not being as substantial. We finish off the goal kicking feats with the Coleman medal. It's the medal meant for the forward, and it is worth 2 points per medal. Still many common faces on this list, and Jack Riewoldt joins Lance Franklin as the only current player to appear on a list so far. He has 3 Colemans, and will definitely have to win a few more to join the 1000 goal club. So already, we find that forwards, and mainly goal kickers, have a large lead on this list. But that's the point. The main aim of the game is to score goals, and these guys perfected the skills of doing so. We move on to total games. Not a statistic that tells us how good they were at the sport, but rather represents some of the greats' longevity. Of course, we have Brent Harvey, who had overtaken Michael Tuck back in 2016. He finishes on 432 games. Shaun Burgoyne, a player I completely forgot past 400 games, finishes 3rd on this list. And we have David Mundy, who has announced that he has played his final game after 19 seasons. He's actually moved up to 8th on this list, as he has played in 2 finals. It's really sad to see him leave the game. Let's move on to a statistic that you've probably never talked about. Finals appearances. I've included this category to show how players have led their teams to final after final and performed at the highest stage numerous times. You'd probably think that this medal favours a bunch of players who have all played for a dynasty and have won multiple premierships together. You'd be right in saying that. Michael Tuck, a player who has won 7 grand finals, tops every other player in the history of the AFL. But he will be passed by Joel Selwood, someone that will very likely play 2 or more games this final series to surpass Tuck. Oh, and every other player on this list, apart from Wayne Schimmelbusch, has won multiple premierships. Sean Burgoyne has won 4 premierships, Harry Taylor with 3, Lee Matthews with 4. You get the idea. Next, we move on to a very good way to tell if a player was great in their position, the All-Australian Award. 2 points awarded for each All-Australian team made. On this list, we can see players from all generations. Paul Roos is the only defender to make this list, and Lance Franklin and Patrick Dangerfield are 2 current players that top the list, and can very likely receive another All-Australian selection. Oh, and Joel Selwood and Craig Bradley also have 6 All-Australian selections, but they don't fit on this table. And now we move on to the Brownlow Medal, the most prestige award, which defines a player's season and ultimately their career. A massive 7 points per medal, as it is the highest award an individual can earn in AFL. Ian Stewart and Bob Skilton are the only players to have played since 1970 to win 3 Brownlow medals. This really is the Midfielders Award, as there are a select few who have won the award who aren't midfielders, like Tony Lockett and Gavin Wanganeen. Another interesting category I've decided to include is adjusted Brownlow votes. Adjusted means votes from older players have been reworked to fit the newer voting system. You can have exceptional seasons, but sometimes players are just shy of winning 1 or even multiple Brownlows. Points have been awarded to the top 20 players with the most votes. The player that tops this list is unsurprisingly Gary Ablett Jr., who shatters the boundaries by beating out Patrick Dangerfield by 32 votes. At number 6 is a player which everyone calls the most consistent player of all time, and someone who will potentially gain some more Brownlow votes come next Brownlow night. Majority of the top players on this list are modern day midfielders, which is a bit sad as modern day forwards and defenders are getting recognised less and less. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we move on to Premierships 1. 4 points per premiership, as it isn't an individual award, but worth enough points to still represent someone's individual greatness. This list is most definitely inaccurate, as some players in the Hawthorn team in the 80s won 4 or more. However, I've decided to make it more interesting by only including potential top 15 players of all time in this table, because it's my video. So, Michael Tuck holds a record that cannot be broken with 7 premierships. Dustin Martin is the only current player on this list with 3. Comment down below if you think he'll win another. And the last major statistic is Norm Smith medals. There's only 4 players on this list because everyone else that could go on this list have only won 1 Norm Smith, and there's about 40 of those players. So, this is the entire list. Dustin Martin proves that he's the best finals player of all time with his record breaking 3 Norm Smith. This medal truly represents someone who can play at the highest stage. So that caps off the 10 major categories that will go toward our final tally. The other 5 minor categories are average disposals, marks, tackles, and marks and goals of the year. The stats categories are worth a few points and are all held by modern day players, and majority of them don't crack the top 30 on our list, so there's no point in showing the table. And each mark and goal of the year is worth 1 point each. I decided to include them because it represents someone's flair and excitement playing the game, but I can assure you that it does not affect our final tally. So now we have our totals. Let's look at the top 15 players of all time according to the numbers. From spots 15 to 11, we have Gary Ablett Sr., Ian Stewart, Simon Black, Lee Matthews, and Sam Mitchell. Now, already, this list looks deceiving. Gary Ablett Sr. at 15, some people consider him as the greatest of all time, and they're not wrong. Gary Ablett Sr. never won a grand final or a Brownlow medal, but despite that, he still cracks the top 15. If he had won a grand final and a Brownlow, he goes up to the top 5 on our list. The fact that he still cracks the top 15 with very few accolades is impressive. We have Ian Stewart, who won a record of 3 Brownlows at number 14. At number 13 we have Simon Black, who was a part of the Brisbane three-peat. And at 12 we have Lee Matthews. Now, I believe him to be the GOAT, even before making this list, and I'd still have him in my top 3. This list will not change my opinion, because, as I said, it's only based off the numbers. And at number 11, we of course have a 4-time premiership player, 3-time All-Australian, and a player with the 3rd most Brownlow votes of all time. you probably won't have this guy in your top 20, but you might want to reconsider that. From spots 10 through 6, we have Adam Goodes, Joel Selwood, Jason Dunstall, Tony Lockett, and Chris Judd. The most surprising entry out of these 5 is definitely Selwood, but take a look at the numbers. 3-time Premiership player, 6-time All-Australian, a Rising Star Award in 2007, 7th all-time in Brownlow votes, and soon to have played the most final games of all time. With that, he has 4 Most Courageous Player of the Year awards, most games played as a captain, most wins as a captain, and if he plays next year, he'll crack the top 10 most games played of all time. Truly an amazing resume. At 10, we have Adam Goodes, who is a 2-time Brownlow medalist. We have Jason Dunstall and Tony Lockett, arguably the 2 best goal kickers of all time. And at number 6, we have Chris Judd, a 2-time Brownlow medalist, as well as a Premiership player and 6-time All-Australian. Now, we look at our players ranked 5 through 2 on this list. Michael Tuck, Dustin Martin, Lance Franklin, and Robert Harvey. Michael Tuck won 7 premierships, and although this is more a team sport, it's still incredible to see an individual win 7 grand finals throughout their career. Dustin Martin, the greatest player of the 2010s, comes in at number 4. 3 premierships, 3 Norm Smiths, 1 Brownlow, and the greatest finals performer in the history of the AFL. The numbers really do complement this man, and I'm glad to see him even make the top 10. Lance Franklin coming in at number 3 shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. This man has accomplished so much in his career, and the fact that he may play on next year is mind-blowing. Currently sitting at 4th all-time goals with 1,043 and looking to surpass the next player. 2 premierships, the most All-Australian selections with 8, 4 Colemans, and top 20 in Brownlow votes despite being a forward. This man is a definite top 10 player of all time. Robert Harvey comes in at our number 2 spot. 6th most games played, 8 All-Australians, 2 Brownlows, 5th most Brownlow votes. That brings us to our number 1 spot. Could you guess who it is?
Crack that out to Ablett. Little 1-2 with Prestia works nicely.
He's well on his way to 50.
Here we go. A dodge, a sidestep.
Everyone knew where that one was going. To Gary Ablett, who lifts it and knocks and has a crack. That's all that Gary Ablett can do.
There's Ablett, the fin, the turnaround, that's a goal. Ablett's kicked 4. Really well done, lead stretch for it. There's Ablett, pocket high ball. Don't tell me. Goodness gracious me. Goodness gracious me. That is an unbelievable goal from Ablett.
Sit back. How about that? Come at the moment. Come at the man. There's Ablett, speaking of enjoying himself, from the pocket. That is as good as it gets from the genius.
He flew over the top, Ablett. Well, he's on again. Runs inside the 50. Didn't fumble that one. Kicks a goal. Okay. Which week is it?
Eight All-Australians, 2 grand finals, the most Brownlow votes of all time by a long shot, 2 Brownlow medals, probably could have won a 3rd if he didn't get injured, single-handedly carried a team for a few years, led Geelong in goal kicking before he became a midfielder, 2-time goal kicking leader when he went to the Gold Coast, 3-time AFL Champion Player of the Year, and the list goes on. I am satisfied with Gary Ablett Jr. coming out on top of this list. But the rest of the list is a bit of a mess, because this list looks at accolades and not skills, leadership, courage, or actually playing the game. It looks very different to what everyone else would have as their top 15 list. Some notable players like Gary Ablett Sr. and Lee Matthews didn't even crack the top 10, and that's simply because they didn't have as many accolades as their peers. So the whole list, I don't think it should be taken that seriously. As I said before, I'd love to do a part 2 and include all players as well as everyone's opinions to come up with a more true and more accurate list. And hey, while you're here, feel free to comment other ideas for videos. Any other creative discussions or looking into other AFL topics would be great ideas. And you can also help me out by liking the video and subscribing. Around 15% of people who are watching the video right now are actually subscribed, so please subscribe to help grow the channel. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Thanks for watching the video.